Hello, class. I'm Joel Stangebye, and I'm going to be talking about creatine and its supplementation on endurance performance. My research paper is specifically looking at collegiate female endurance athletes, but this particular source is only referring to creatine and endurance performance. So, a little agenda. Going to be talking about, going to give a little background about creatine, and also going to be looking at some mechanisms that can influence endurance performance. Some examples of this are increasing the creatine and glycogen content in the muscles, reducing neuromuscular activity, and also improved buffering capacity, as well as improved oxygen uptake and overall VO2 kinetics. Next, going to look at supplementation and endurance performance, so how it actually went. Going to be looking at the effects of the time to exhaustion and total work completed, and also creatine's effects on time trial performance, as well as supplementation with intermittent endurance sports and enhancing high intensity repeatability. And I'll get more into that later. And then, I'll just talk about some limitations and conclusions that I had. So, first off, creatine is a well-established ergogenic aid to enhance training, muscle power, muscle endurance, and overall strength. But its effects of endurance performance is currently less known, and that's what I'm hoping to find out more. Creatine can be obtained through diet, mainly through meat and seafood, red meat and poultry. It is difficult to saturate creatine in the body through diet alone. So your typical omnivore will increase their creatine levels by roughly 20% through supplementation. It is important to note that you don't really need creatine supplementation if you are following the carnivore diet. Personal note, but I figured that out while I tried. Very interesting. Not sure if I would recommend it, but yeah. Creatine that is consumed is converted to phosphocreatine, or PCR, and this helps resynthesize ATP by working with adenosine diphosphate, ADP, and it's catalyzed by creatine kinase to rapidly resynthesize ATP, which in theory would produce more energy during performance. All right, going into some potential mechanisms that could lead to an increase in endurance performance. The first one is increasing the total creatine and glycogen content. So increased phosphocreatine can lead to a greater reliance on the phosphagen system during intense effort. This could be associated with an improved performance in time to exhaustion, repeated sprints, and anaerobic work capacity. It's important to note that no workout or any sort of performance is purely aerobic or anaerobic, but is determined by the intensity and duration of that exercise. Creatine also facilitates the uptake and retention of glycogen through the upregulation of glucose transporter 4. It has also been shown that studies of a high-carb diet with and without creatine show a greater glucose retention in the creatine group for up to 6 days. So a greater amount of glycogen available in the muscles days following creatine supplementation. As far as neuromuscular activity and buffering capacity, creatine increases calcium reuptake into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, enhancing myofibrillar, sorry about that, cross-bridge cycling and force development. And creatine also acts as a buffer since phosphocreatine hydrolysis consumes a hydrogen ion. So this suggests that creatine could be beneficial for athletes who perform multiple surges during a race or during the finishing aspects of a sprint. Creatine also enhances neuromuscular activity. It has been shown to increase electromyography fatigue threshold. This suggests that endurance exercise performed closer to or at the maximal metabolic rate could have an increased time to fatigue. Now, looking at the effects of oxygen consumption, overall muscular efficiency is improved via creatine. Studies have graded exercise tests that have shown creatine supplementation does not affect time to exhaustion, maximal power output, but it did positively affect the absolute VO2 max. It's also important to note that creatine supplementation is different for different people, and this could depend on the ratio of fast switch to slow twitch muscle fibers, and also the amount of creatine that is consumed in one's diet. Looking at the inflammatory response, creatine has antioxidant capabilities and anti-inflammatory effects following endurance exercises. There's been some studies that show that pre-race creatine reduced the rise in prostaglandin, tumor necrosis, factor alpha, and these are both markers of inflammation. Excuse me. So looking at some actual results of creatine that was found to be interesting is the time to exhaustion. So studies have shown so it goes both ways. Studies have shown that there is and that there is not a significant increase in time to exhaustion in well-trained endurance athletes. Done ranging from 90 to 600 seconds. And as you might be able to guess, there is a greater increase for the shorter and shorter durations, the more anaerobic exercises. Looking at the time trial performances, these are what people consider to be more valid when it comes to endurance training and grading, and these consistently failed to show a significant. And in the case of running, it actually slowed some people down when they first started using creatine. This is likely due to the weight gain attributed to the increased water drawn to the muscles, which was an average about just over 2 pounds. But non-weight bearing activities like cycling did not show a decline. And there was actually an increased power output during the final 20-minute sprint of an endurance bout. And it's also been shown in swimming that the last 50 meters of a 400-meter swim was improved by the supplementation of creatine versus a placebo. In looking at creatine supplementation and intermittent endurance sports, this is referring to that high-intensity repeatability that I was talking about earlier. So when you get into endurance events like cross-country skiing, mountain biking, cycling, triathlon, there is a need for numerous surges in intensity, whether you're going up a hill, down a hill, and having to brace for impact. And they're all dependent on skill, terrain, race dynamics, the course design, and pre-planned race tactics as well. And these on their own are characterized as short duration. But there are several surges above the ventilatory threshold between 5 to 15 seconds long. And during these bouts of higher intensity, as part of an endurance race, creatine could have a beneficial impact, but that has not been proven yet. So that is the high intensity repeatability. So an endurance event that has a lot of high intensity throughout it, would add up, would it make a difference? And that's still needs to be researched. And this kind of brings me into my last content slide about the limitations in future research. Um, Swimming has been shown to help the final sprint during a longer swimming race, but this has not been shown in running, road mountain biking, cross country skiing, or rowing, anything like that. So more research needs to be done there to determine the efficacy of that last sprint. Um, Another question is, can creatine preserve these fast twitch fibers traits during high volume training? And this has been proven at a low frequency in rats, but this study needs to be performed in people. In this last question, a periodized approach to creatine. So something that also hasn't really been studied for an endurance athlete is creatine for perhaps part of the year when one is trying to increase their speed and power. Um, yeah, and that could make a difference, and there could be a place for it in this world. Um, so yeah, that's the current limitations. And in conclusions, I think this was a really well written article. It was easy to follow. It was bulleted nicely. Had three big sections with a couple subheaders under each one, and kind of as I read it, pretty much took it from that. And it does emphasize the need for more research. It did reference some studies that I did not include in this, so it was very thorough, very extensive, and it recognized its own limitations. The mixed results are frequent, and I'm not gonna the article for that reason. I think that's just the nature of this topic, creatine and endurance athletes. It can have a place, but it's just not known at the moment. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to learn more about it. Maybe some more sources will help me out better. Um, but yeah, thanks for listening.